All right, we're going to take a quick look at how to adjust the taxable value of property in Impact Dashboard. So here I am in a scenario. I've got all my information plugged in, and the thing that I want to do right now is adjust how this capital investment gets translated into taxable property and then ultimately generates property tax revenues for the different taxing districts. So here, capital investment, I've plugged in $10 million in our column in year one for the building and other real property improvements, so $10 million there. And then for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, I've plugged in $6 million. So total of $16 million in capital investment. Now let's take a look at how that translates into taxable property and then how we can adjust it. So the first place we're looking obviously is right here at our input for capital investment. Now we can see in one of our reports the actual year by year values of taxable property. We can do that by clicking on the report tab and choosing the detailed report, and then I already jumped to it here. We can see this table. It's actually like the third table down from the top. If we take a look here, we see a summary of the taxable property over the first 10 years. And we can see we've got columns for all kinds of stuff here, but the two we want to focus on right now are for buildings and FF&E. So for the building, we can see this column has $10 million. That was actually the value we plugged in. And the FF&E, that also has the value we plugged in of $6 million. Now, if we look at it over time, the building is actually increasing in value. It looks like it's increasing by about 2% per year. And that's a function of our parameter around real property appreciation. Now, the FF&E, again, that one starts at $6 million, which is the full investment amount of property, of equipment property, but then it declines in value, and you can see what that looks like there. So what's going on, and how can we kind of configure that if that's not exactly what we want to do? What we can do, this screen is kind of showing us that end result. The capital investment inputs was kind of showing us the initial kind of inputs there. What we can do is kind of take that middle stage and go in here to our settings by clicking in the upper right-hand corner in this gear icon. We can click on settings, and we can get to those parameters that are going to be used to kind of go from point A to point B. So if we look here, we've got a number of property and construction assumptions. This one is where we want to start. This one says percent of building and improvement costs that represent market value. So here it's 100%. This is basically saying that if you spend $10 million on a brand new building, that it's going to become a $10 million building, a market value of a $10 million building. Sometimes that's not really the case. You might spend $10 million, but the building actually, is valued at, say, $8 million. And so if that's the case, what you want to do is adjust this percentage to kind of bring it down so it's not fully taxed at that $10 million. That's overtaxed, or essentially the value of that is too high. So what we want to do, we can click on this Edit Defaults. Without doing that, if I don't do that, we can't really click on any of these things. We can't do anything. If I hit Edit Defaults, it just lets me click into those things and make any changes we'd like. So in this case, as I mentioned, I'm going to change this from 100% to 80%. And if I go back to our report, we can kind of see this happen in real time. We've got that building column. You remember it was $10 million before. Now we're looking at it and we see that it's $8 million. It's still increasing. It's still increasing at 2% over time. If we wanted to adjust that, we can go back into our settings and control that parameter. That is going to be our commercial and industrial real property appreciation percent. Let's say that we wanted it to be a flat $8 million over the full term in this case. And so I'll put that at 0, so there's no real property appreciation. Jump back to our report, and now we see that flat $8 million over 10 years. Now as we're doing this, and so we'll stop here for a minute, we can jump back and we can go back to our initial inputs, and we can see we still have the $10 million and the $6 million. We're still getting full credit for that investment. The capital investment hasn't changed. It's still $16 million. What we have changed is this amount that will actually be subject to property tax. Now, the other parameter that we were looking for was really this depreciation schedule. So what's going on? This is kind of a declining in value over time. We're taking the $6 million and then applying the depreciation schedule. So if we click on our settings, we've got that depreciation schedule shown right here. So if property that's added in year one of our project, that's going to be correspond to year one of the life of that property. So that's 100%. Then in year two, it'll be 90%, 80%, and so on, all the way down, and we have a salvage value of 20% in years 9 and 10. So we can see that that is what's getting applied here in this column for FF&E. And if you wanted to adjust this, let's say that you knew that the $6 million of property was a very specific type of property that had a very specific type of depreciation schedule, you could go in and adjust that depreciation schedule to match the depreciation schedule that you wanted to use. As a general rule, there's going to be all different types of property. It's probably more hassle than it's worth in terms of trying to estimate exactly what that's going to look like. There may be additional investments over time that are not initially picked up with this type of analysis. And so realistically, as we're projecting out 10 years, we feel confident that that generalized version of depreciation schedule will kind of keep you on the right side of things and maybe take into account that real world concept of depreciation without overestimating your tax revenues. Now, I didn't really talk about the land. Essentially, whatever we would put, let's say that if we're going to put something in there for the land, if we put $1 million, that's going to go through just straight on in as if it's valued at $1 million, it's going to be $1 million over here. It would get the same real property appreciation, so land and building representing real property. That's going to get that same real property appreciation rate applied to it. In this case, we had zeroed it out, so we're seeing $1 million all the way down. Now, one thing that I have so far left out of the discussion, we've talked about kind of market value, but really what we're showing in this table is taxable value. The last step when we go from market value to taxable value is applying the assessment ratio, if there is one, for the actual taxing jurisdiction. So if we, again, click up in here on our settings, and this time I'm going to take a look at what's happening for the city. We're in Texas, and so Texas, basically, there is no assessment ratio. It's really taxed at the market value of the property. So what we can see here is our assessment ratio for buildings is 100%. Now, if you were in a state where maybe this was a different percentage, maybe it's 50% in your state, what you would see then, the taxable value would drop down then to the $4 million. Originally it was $8 million, but then we apply the assessment ratio, it drops to $4 million to actually be taxable. But in our case, we kind of weren't seeing that step because our assessment ratio was 100% and just getting kind of multiplied by a 1.